Welcome to Modiphius Calling. I'm Josh, and I'm joined today by Chris Birch, who is the founder of Modiphius. Welcome, Chris.
Hello again.
And today the subject is a new product, Airfix Battles. So, Chris, could you tell us just a little bit about what the game is, I guess?
So it all starts probably when I was about 7 or 8, and I was playing Plastic Soldier Battles with my mate Johnny from next door, my neighbour. And you know, when you're a kid, you're like making machine gun sounds and mowing down figures left, right, and centre. And then one day we kind of got bored of that. So I said, well, why don't we roll a dice, and that's how many soldiers you get to knock over. And he was like, oh, okay, that's really fun. And then I said, well, of course, you know, you can't just knock over the general. That he's got like 3 lives, and then it's like, okay, we'll roll two dice if it's a tank, and we ended up with this big paper sheet covered in ideas and little rules we'd come up with, and so that's how we then continued playing with our Airfix figures and tanks, and
okay,
kept us playing for a lot longer than we might have done anyway, and jump forward in time to like last year, quite a long time. And I was passing the Airfix stand at the Toy Fair in London. And just on the spur of the moment, I pitched the idea of wouldn't it be great to make a game that kept kids playing with their toy soldiers or Airfix figures longer than they would. And another reason for dads or mums to get out of the attic, the big lunchbox they've got of plastic soldiers, you know, Airfix figures and tanks that everyone has somewhere stored away. And, you know, it's a reason for families to reconnect, but also just a great fun war game that you can play in 30 minutes, 60 minutes and feel like you've played a war game, but without having all the setup time and preparation and all of that. So that's kind of how Airfix Battles came about. Me and my friend Nick Fallon, who's he's been the lead designer on it, kind of took the reins, and we'd been working on a project called One War, which was going to be for Acton Cthulhu actually, and it was a card-based war game that all your units were on cards, and there were cards for orders. A bit inspired by there's a war game called PK, which you draw cards and that tells you whether you move, you know, armor or infantry or cavalry or guns or whatever. And obviously Memoir 44 is good inspiration. You know, you're drawing cards to see what you can do, but we wanted something more tactical where you literally are moving squads around and tanks, and you're trying to take the farmhouse or defend the ridge. And we also wanted bigger ideas, like, you know, being able to play solo is great fun as well. And, you know, I was really good at playing myself on games, you know, so okay, right, I'm going to win. Okay, now I'm going to win. No, I'm going to win now. So I was really good at, but really you want that kind of that fun challenge of being able to play against a game. So we also wanted to do something that you could play solo and it'd be really satisfactory. So Airfix Battles took shape over the last year because Airfix loved the idea. I mean, we were lucky that the guy Jim there was, you know, into games as well, and kind of saw the potential for it. So we've you know, spent the whole year developing it and working on it and refining it and simplifying it, and you know, getting the rules down to a bare minimum so you can still do interesting things like you know, obviously one of the things you can do in the game is you can pin a unit and assault it so that they can't pour withering fire into your unit. And you know, you've got flank attacks on vehicles, you've got a changing armor level of tanks, and what I actually like the best is the fact that you've got a big deck of cards that's commanders, you've got infantry and guns, and you've got tanks, and each command card tells you exactly what you can command with that commander. It's got a few icons on it, and it will tell you that, for example, you must have an infantry unit, but you can optionally have a tank unit, an extra infantry unit of different points values. And the points values are stars. They're basically stars from 1 to 5, and that's the points value of the unit. So you might go, okay, we're going to play a 20-star game. So I might go off and get a 5-star major, and then a 1-star lieutenant, and then they'll tell me the different units that they can command. And so I then buy those cards. And as you lose those, you give the card to the enemy, and that's the stars are the points value that it's worth. It's so simple. But what I really love is the fun of actually building your force. So you're kind of pulling all these cards out and going, well, should I have 3 tanks because they're like 4 points each, and or just have loads of infantry, or I could have a mortar. So you get to the fun of kind of building your little force, and then taking it into battle. And each card has everything you need to know on it. We have what's called a war dice number, and that's one number that each figure or the vehicle rolls to hit. War dice are you always want to roll equal to or greater than your war dice. And the idea is there's always one number that you roll. It's not like loads of different other numbers. So as far as infantry are concerned and guns, and firing at infantry, it's one number, you roll that number or higher and you've succeeded. And if it's an attack roll, you roll that for every unit, so either for a tank or for each individual infantry figure. If you're making a morale check, you roll the same, you roll 1 dice for the whole unit, but it's the same number that you're trying to get. So it keeps it simple. The only difference is in tanks, you roll a number of dice based on your anti-tank value, but again, you're still trying to get the same war dice value that's printed on your card. Every card's got this nice little dice symbol that says this is what you need to roll. So it's always in front of your face, which is great. You've got your movement spaces, etc. And if the enemy aren't in cover, there's no save, they get killed. If they're in cover, they roll their war dice number as a save. And so it's really, really, really simple. And the game flows quickly. It's you can play a game with say 2 or 4 squads in about 30 minutes, and that's showing someone how to play the game. It is actually that quick, and you might play to a number of stars, a bit like in Memoir. You play to a number of stars, because you get a star for each unit typically. And you might get a star for capturing a town. Whereas in this game, you might, if you destroy a tank that's worth 4 stars, you might capture a building that's worth 3 stars. So there's lots of sort of fun objectives, and we've really worked hard to keep the game flowing quickly. We take turns commanding units, and each commander gives you a number of command cards, and these are the really fun bit of the game because you never quite know where the enemy is, and each command card has actually 3 options typically. You can always move or fire a unit, or reinforce, which means bring on a new unit that you've been holding off board. Otherwise, you've usually got 2 cool things that you can do. It might be, for example, fire 2 infantry units and move both of them at +1 movement. Or it might be move and fire a tank. Or move an infantry +1 movement and then fire, or it could be a various combination. It could be artillery strikes or air strikes. It could be we have what's called interrupt cards. So if you play a movement card, I can stop you. Go, wait, stop! I'm shooting at you. So it's kind of a bit like opportunity fire. So there's a lot of variety in the cards. You never quite know where the enemy's forces are because he might be about to play a card that moves them twice as fast as they go, double time. Units can dive into cover just when you think you've got them. So, and each commander, this is where the choice of commanders is important, gives you a hand size, which is the number of command cards that you can have in your hand, and a play size, so the number of command cards that you can actually play. So whilst you might have like 10 units, you might only be able to command 5 of them. So you've got to really think about having enough commanders to support your units. And if you lose commanders, you lose the ability to draw cards and control units as well. So it's really fun, and it's launching in June, and it's £25, so about $35, and it doesn't have any plastic figures in it because we wanted to keep the price right down. What it does have is all the cardboard counters you need for infantry, for tanks, for guns, for half tracks, and And so we wanted to keep the price really accessible, so anyone can pick it up. Because let's face it, most of us have got boxfuls of plastic soldiers at home.
And if you don't, I mean, how much is a box of Airfix soldiers? I've got probably some over there in
£5, £7. Yeah, every and if it's not Airfix, it's there's plenty of other ranges, and you can even use like we did a demo today with some Flames of War based up figures, because obviously based up typically 4 or 5 to a base, and so the counters that we've got, which are little infantry counters, flip over and they're wound counters. So if you've got your figures based up, you just use the counters to mark casualties. So it's really simple, and so you can pretty much use any figures that you've got. And we've got a collector's edition coming later in the year, which
what will be in that?
Well, that's going to be all the collected rules, because we've got a couple of expansions coming out that will introduce air rules, bunkers, like D-Day landing maps, extra maps and cards. But we're also stripping away the maps, because you get maps in the game. There's 2 big double-sided maps you play moving from square to square. A bit like if people know Dust has squares that you move.
Are they going to be paper maps or card maps, or what kind of maps?
They've got really nice art on them, and you put counters down to represent terrain. So you might put down a farmhouse that gives you cover. You each get a number of what we call edge terrain, which is like a bit of hedge, and you get a number that you can put down yourself to provide you some cover where you want your strategy to be. So we give you a bit of customization of the maps. There's 2 double-sided maps, quite big, so you've got quite a lot of variety for missions, and we're introducing more maps. But the collector's edition strips away all of that. So it's okay. Let's say you want to play a proper war game without the maps. I've got all this beautiful terrain, so I want to do a proper big war game. So there's the rules for that. You still use the cards. The movement points convert into inches or centimeters, so we have different scales, because we're also going to show you, I don't know if you know, there's the 1/32 scale Airfix figures, which are awesome. So we're doing a kind of larger scale version of games, so you can use your larger scale figures, your larger scale tanks, and play really big fun-sized battles, because of course there's loads of terrain at that size as well.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was always 1/35 scale was the modeling scale that I liked, because the soldiers are like that big.
Yeah, so there's some great tanks and vehicles at that scale. And you can get lots of buildings and stuff, and of course there's lots of old Airfix terrain that you can still get, like the forward command post and walls and things. So that collector's edition will introduce things like Fog of War. It will introduce more developed solo rules. It will introduce campaign rules. There's all kinds of stuff that we're kind of adding into the book, and it will have all the base introductory game rules as well. And so if you just want to dive into that, I mean, it's coming out in the autumn, but then you can pick up the card decks separately, and then just get the sort of components that you want. So, but the introductory box is a real no-brainer. Gives you everything you need, all the card decks, maps, rules, to just get you playing. And literally, you can open that box and you've got everything you need to play a half-hour war game or an hour war game, and you're longer if you want. There's a 4-player scenario. You actually get 10 scenarios in the game, and each scenario, you kind of, as you're reading the rules, it walks you through. Okay, you now know enough to play scenario 1. Go off and play that. Come back. Okay, here's another couple of rules. Right, now go and play scenario 2, scenario 3, and it just walks you through rules. So you kind of introduce armor, I think, in like mission 4 or 5. So it does it stage by stage, so you're not overwhelmed with massive rule book, and it's pretty short anyway. It's it's only about 16 pages, and it's kind of beautifully simple. So, but it feels like you're playing a war game. It feels like, I felt like we did a game today that was about an hour long, and it felt like we were playing a proper war game. So it was really good.
Is there a particular audience that you had in mind when you were developing the game, like beginning war gamers, or is it what audience did you develop?
Yeah, well, really war gamers, I think, because there's a lot of war gamers that don't have time for a 4-hour war game, but they do have time for an hour or even half an hour. Yeah, and I love having epic all day long war games. I mean, we used to play Flames of War, from 9 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, whatever, and that's great. They're brilliant fun, but sometimes you just don't have that time. and maybe you've got a short evening, and so this is a great game for people who want to feel like they've got that flavour of playing a war game. They've got the depth, it's got the strategy, but just don't have the time. It sets up really quick. At the same time, it's also for dads who want to play an introductory game with their kids, and it's for the kids who it might be their first game, and because it's so simple. I mean, I learned how to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was 9, and I learned how to play the Ogre hex-based war game when I was about 8, and so it's it's no more complex than anything like that, and probably a bit simpler actually. And it's because it's very visual. The rulebook's got loads of examples of play and graphics, so it really walks you through the gameplay very, very easily. And
I noticed that on the Geek there's no weight listed there, so where would you put the weight of the game?
The weight of the game is a good question. I think it's about
5, I think.
Yeah, it's about 1 kilo, maybe a bit less actually. So it's pretty cheap shipping as well, because it's
Oh no, I mean the game weight. Like there's a weight for the games on Board Game Geek. That's cool though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, where would you? So you would say it's like a 2 or something like that, or?
Yeah. It's maybe it's a 3, 2 to 3. It's obviously it's different for different people depending on what your game experience is. For some people, some easy games for us are actually quite complex. So obviously it is a war game, so there are a fair amount of rules in there, and you've got things like line of sight and assaults and morale, but it's all done very simply. I mean, a lot of the stuff is stripped right down because the real flavor is in the unit cards. That's where they get different. So for example, American units get to roll an extra dice. You roll a dice for every soldier, but American units roll 1 more dice because they've got slightly higher firepower, whereas Panzer Grenadiers get to can unload from a vehicle and move, whereas most units don't, and so they could go straight into an assault. So we've got all this like clever little flavor without having really complex rules. So
as far as the countries that are involved, what is in the base game, and what are you planning for expansions and that kind of thing? So
in the base game, you get allies, which is effectively American troops versus German troops. And I mean, I always liked playing with American soldiers when I was a kid. I never liked the British soldiers, but we have got a bonus kit, which if you pre-order before next week, actually, so it might be over by this time, but you can be able to buy it on the site. There's a £5 little bonus pack of cards. It's like 24 cards that gives you the British forces, like British infantry, commandos, and also British tanks, like things like the Sherman Firefly. You get like there's the Sherman Calliope, the big rocket launch tank. You've also got things like Michael Whitman's Tiger. There's the King Tiger. Various other kind of cool tanks in it. So it's like if you want to upgrade your box set, and then there'll be like I said, we've got this expansion coming with an air pack with planes, D-Day landing maps, bunker rules, that kind of stuff later in the summer.
Okay, great. And are you going to add additional nations, like as the time goes, like Japan and?
Yeah, so there'll be because of course there was lots of Pacific sets, like there was the Australian infantry, the Japanese infantry, the US Marines, that kind of thing. So we're going to do a Pacific set with Japanese tanks and some of the US, amphibious.
Gurkhas.
Yeah, the Gurkhas. Yeah, can't forget them. And then we've got of course, then there's the North Africa. So you've got like Desert Rats, Africa Corps. The Africa Corps set was always really cool. And then you've got a lot of, like, Airfix did a lot of kind of vehicle, like tank sets set in the deserts. There's loads of really great artwork for it. So, and we're using all the original artwork from a lot of the sets, which is brilliant. So, but of course, they don't have the artwork for every vehicle. So we have to use a kind of montage of vehicles in some cases. So
one thing I think that's interesting is that, I mean, I belong to a war game club, and if you rolled up with with a box of Airfix figures as the other guys are probably like, they've got their DBMs and their metal figures and all that. Well, I mean, like, since the game is branded Airfix, it's like that's totally cool. And it seems to me that as far as like if I want to be able to play a war game, that the entry price of this and the price to expand, and the price to have vast armies is just way lower. Tanks, things like that. I mean, everybody's had, people who are in the miniature wargaming have had the experience of, you know, going to the toy store and going to the hardware store and just going all over eBay and anywhere you can to try to find that tank that you don't have and, you know, not pay too much money for it and that kind of thing. These can be very expensive hobbies.
Yeah, I know. And the great thing with this is, you know, for like $7, you get a box, you get 48 figures in a box, so you've got like enough for a whole platoon. And because, you know, that's obviously, if fans of Plastic Soldiers will know that Airfix don't make 1/72 scale mortars, for example. So say for the Germans, but because you have a unit and you have it goes on the mortar card and with your figures on the table, so you just put any figures on the table. Of course, you could go and get other makes that make mortars. There are people like Plastic Soldier Company that do 1/72 scale support units. There are, you know, other makes. You can use your Flames of War figures. So, you know, it's not the end of the world. But with the great thing is, with your plastic figures, you can just use stand-ins as snipers or MG teams or whatever. Or again, of course, you've got the counters, so it's not the end of the world. But that's the great thing with plastics. It's so cheap to build up your force, just to play the game. And then, of course, you could always go, actually, you know, I'm going to go out and buy my Flames of War to play with this, and then convert over to the full-scale battles. And you know, what we wanted to be able to do is have a really big battle inside. You know, if you were going to do a longer game, you could do an insane, massive size battle, rather than having to keep it manageable, you know.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was a kid, my primary exposure to Airfix is my friend brought over a couple boxes, and I had train sets and building blocks and Lincoln Logs and all this stuff, and we set it all up on the ping pong table. So an enormous table. We built a huge city, and then we stationed all the German troops in there, and then we took the Lincoln Logs and made little catapults, and you could shoot them, you know, and try to knock off the MP40 gunner on the tower and all that. So, I mean, it would be pretty easy to set up something that big.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, that you could, because the game's so simple, it's easy to have a really big battle, you know, and with a lot of forces. I mean, today, the game we played, we had 25 points, which I had 3 tanks, I had 3 commanders, and I had a machine gun team, paratroopers squad, and 2 rifle squads, and then I had some extra. I had some sort of a forward observer, which gave me an artillery strike, and some veterans with my commander, like as guards. So yeah, it was quite a big force, and it was, you know, a lot we could do on the battle, and that's not the biggest games that you can play.
So could you take us through the setup of a sample game and then the first turn, maybe?
Well, I should get some cards. Then I can hold them up and show them. So when I'm building the force, and again, it's really simple because we color code the cards. Just gonna show a little hand here.
So this is the first step here?
Yeah, so you know, you've got a bunch of cards which are purple for attachments to your commanders. You've got orange cards, which are commanders, green infantry, red armor. And so each card has stars in the top left, which is your points value and the victory point value if you lose the unit. So I'm starting with my commander, and the commander has some colored blocks down the side, which is really easy. It tells me that I've got a green block with 2 stars, which means I must have an infantry unit with 2 stars. So I'm going to take an infantry squad. It also says 2 purple blocks, but they've got a little band on it, which means they're optional. So I'm going to take a little kind of half squad of veterans, 4 veterans, because they're going to be bodyguards for the infantry captain.
Cool.
Now that means I've spent 2 points on the infantry captain, 2 on the infantry squad, 1 on the veterans. So I've spent 5 points so far.
Can you show us what you've got after spending 5 points?
Okay, yeah. So This is what I've spent so far. Okay.
Okay, so that is like your command unit, kind of.
Yeah. And we might be playing a small points battle. He's also got two more. Oops, wrong one. He's also got two more blocks here. One which is another 2-point block I could have optionally, and a 4-point block, meaning I can have up to 4 points. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another infantry squad as an optional, and that could be my little force. So I've actually got a captain with 2 squads, and he's got some veterans assigned to it, and that force now consists of there we go. Let's do this properly. So that's my little force so far. So this could be a little starting unit.
So that's how many points altogether?
That is 7 points. So
okay, so let's play a 7-point game then.
Commander, yeah. He's not a he doesn't allow any tanks. So if I wanted a tank, I'd have to pick another commander that has a red block allowing me to buy tanks, or a tank commander, which obviously is in a tank in its own right. So so then the Germans would do the same thing. We'd say, okay, maybe it is a small game that we've only got half an hour. Let's have just like a couple of squads and a commander each. I could actually.
One thing I'm seeing that you could do is you could draw the commanders randomly and then have unequal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I also like the idea that I could just draw random cards and see what I ended up with. So I could draw randomly and go, okay, I've got 17 points worth here. Well, I could keep drawing until I've got, say, 15 points, and then I stop, and then you now draw until you've got 15 points. And that would be a complete random. You'd have to make sure you had at least one. Maybe what we do is, okay, we both pick a commander that's like 3 points or something, but then you draw. And you don't have to follow the command instructions. This is a simple way for you to build structured little units. It's a really nice way how it works. So once we bought our force, we then roll dice for initiative. Whoever gets initiative gets to place terrain first, so because we have our own little pieces of hedge terrain, and also gets to then they'll place their unit first. But the person who doesn't get initiative gets what's called a valor token, and the valor token lets you re-roll one or all the dice in a dice roll in any situation where you're rolling the dice. But as soon as you do that, you give the valor token to the other player, and then they can do it. And so it's basically a way of mitigating luck a little bit. If you get a really bad dice roll, then you can use it. But of course, your enemy's now got it to use.
I can see that scaling out and getting really exciting really fast if I choose a major dramatic maneuver, and then you immediately get the counter with something equally dramatic.
Yeah, of course.
So then then we've laid the terrain, we've handed out the valor piece. What's next?
Yeah, so the other thing is we're going to need some command cards. So this infantry captain has a hand size of 4 and a play of 2. So I'm going to pick up some command cards, and I'm just going to show you some examples of them.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's see what's on those bad boys.
Yeah. So these basically there's basically 2 different types of cards. There's like green cards and red cards. Green cards let you give actions to your units. Red cards are interrupts. They stop the action and let you do something really fun. So and every action card has a default order, which is move, fire, or reinforce. So no matter what happens, I can play this just as the back of the card. It doesn't matter what's on the other side. And I can move a unit, I can fire a unit, or I can reinforce, which basically means, let's say one of my infantry was kept off the board because I could only start with 5 points on the board or whatever. So that lets me bring him on.
Okay.
Now, the actual orders, we've got a couple here as examples. Infantry, assault, and open up. So open up says either one vehicle unit may move once and fire all its weapons once each, which is important because that means it can fire its anti-tank gun and its machine guns. Or, and we've got a little symbol here, one infantry unit with rifles may move, then fire using rifles, re-roll once for each miss when firing at a target in 2 squares. It's pretty powerful. So yeah. I don't have any vehicles in this, so I'd probably use that. But actually, the alternative is infantry assault. This one says either fire with 1 infantry unit and then move 2 infantry units once each. If they can move next to an enemy unit, they could potentially be doing an assault. So that's really powerful. Or move 1 infantry unit with +1 movement points, ending in an assault, and with an extra combat dice, combat dice added to the assault dice rolls. So that's actually quite a powerful assault on its own. So I'd be like, oh, which one should I do? You know, I really want to get all those infantry units up. I'm going to play that one. Okay. Yeah, so then this is an interrupt card. An interrupt card lets you stop the action and do something quick. So let's say your other player was playing this infantry assault card. And you go, wait, stop a minute. I've got interrupt fire. 1 unit may fire during an enemy move action. This fire must target the enemy unit that moved. So it's a bit like opportunity fire. It can stop you. Yeah. I roll an attack, which is basically everything can only act once with a command card unless it's interrupt, in which case it can act again. So this lets you attack a unit that's moving up towards you maybe or crossing your line of fire. So it's really fun because you never know when that's going to happen. And, it just gives that real tension to the game because you never, it might be a move card. If you might be about to assault me and I can move away, go, no, I'm not going to stay there and get destroyed. It might be there's actually a counterintelligence that lets you cancel one of those cards as well. So there's a lot of cards like that. There's artillery strikes, air strikes. There are cards that help you recover your morale. The other clever thing is that, I'm going to show you an example here. If you take 2 hits, you have to take a morale check. Every unit has what's called our war dice number. When you're rolling to attack, you roll a dice for every figure, every soldier in the unit. So this guy is 10 men, so that rolls 10 dice. If I get at least 2 hits, that causes a morale check on the enemy unit. So they roll 1 dice, and they've got to get their war dice number, which is, with this infantry squad, it's a 5+. If I fail, I turn the card, and now it's pinned. You can't move or shoot. The enemy captain has to play a command card on it to make a morale check and try and make it A-OK again. If it takes a second morale check, it goes into retreat. Turns again, it says retreat here, and the unit must move 2 spaces away from the nearest enemy. And if it can't move 2 spaces away from the enemy, then it's destroyed. Right. So again, really simple morale rules. If you're within the move distance of your commander, you can use your commander's ability. Like my captain's a 4 rather than a 5, so that's better. And so that keeps the game flowing quickly because morale doesn't bog you down in these sort of complex rules. So yeah, it's great fun. And once we've taken turns setting up all our figures, we've got our command cards. That's when we start alternating activation. So I activate a unit. Well, several units. I play a command card. I mean, in the case of this infantry assault, I could actually activate 3 infantry squads. So that would actually, in my case, that's actually my whole force. So it's a really powerful card. Every turn, I get to redraw the cards I've used, and I can discard and redraw. And then, so I get a new hand of cards, and you can keep some because sometimes they are pretty good. And you think, oh, I'm going to use that one. and often you'll be in a case where you've never quite got enough command cards for the number of units you've got, and you've got to rethink which ones you're going to activate and do. So there's always a kind of balancing act of, where do you put your command efforts.
And unlike Memoir, though, if you don't have the right card that reflects the unit you have, you can always use the reverse, saying you can move.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's good. Sorry.
So, but also unlike Memoir, generally there's only one use for the card, whereas we wanted to provide different uses for like vehicles, for infantry, and quite unusual types of actions and assaults. So all kinds of different things could happen, which makes the strategy of the game. What it meant is you don't need loads of rules in the book, because actually the rules are often here on the cards. Like the units themselves have their special abilities on the cards. So for example, US veterans have SMGs. They're range 3, they roll 1 dice per soldier, re-roll once for each miss when firing at adjacent squares, because they're lots of heavy firepower. Grenades, range 1, you roll a 5+ for the entire firing unit, ignoring the number of men in the unit. The targets get no cover save, so grenades are great at close range. So basically, you roll 1 dice against each of the men in the defensive unit, so it's pretty lethal. Infantry squads, American firepower, the unit gains 1 extra dice when making an attack against infantry, and these rules are motorized, so you can actually buy a transport without using an armor choice from your commander. So in this case, I could have spent more points to buy a half track and even though the commander doesn't have armor or vehicles as a selection choice. So because US infantry are motorized more often than Germans, they get to buy that as well if you've got enough points. So it works really well. Armor is the same idea. So tanks have a war dice number. Obviously, you're only 1 tank in the square. So when they attack, for example, this Sherman M4 has anti-tank 3. That means it rolls 3 dice to attack, and it needs to get its war dice value, which in this case is a 5. So if it hits on, say, 2 of those dice, it now has to penetrate the enemy tank. So, in the case for Sherman, he's got armor 4. So what we do is we put a dice next to the tank with a 4 face up. So if I've got 2 hits on a tank with armor 4, I roll 2 dice, and I need to get 4 or greater to penetrate the armor. But here's the clever thing. Let's say we get a 4 and a 3. So the 4 is a hit, it penetrates. It reduces that dice down to a 3. The 3, it wasn't a hit, but it now is a hit. And it reduces the dice down to a 2. So as you're damaging a tank, you're increasing the chance that you can get a critical hit on it and destroy it. So more powerful tanks start with higher armor, longer range, more attack dice. They also have MGs. They get to roll dice against infantry. So, again, simple abilities give all the different flavor of different tanks and forces from World War II.
I bet people would love to see a comparison between a Tiger and a Sherman if you've got them to hand.
That's a very good idea. Yeah, let me hold that thought. What I'm going to show you is going to look at the bonus deck, which has got some of the British in, but it's also got some super powerful cards in, which are really fun.
So you like playing the Americans. I'm American. I like playing the British.
Yes. I just thought they were cooler uniforms and tanks and stuff.
We had cooler hats, I think.
Hats? Yeah, I did actually. I didn't like them.
Helmets.
But okay, so what have we got here? We've got so this is the extra set of cards. So this includes a Panther, Michael Whitman's Tiger, the SDKFZ 222 armored car, the Stug assault gun, or the Sturmige Schütz.
I hate those things. I've run into them many times in various games.
Yeah, there's the King Tiger. We've got a bazooka team, US engineers, the Sherman Callio, the rocket launcher tank, M8 Greyhound, an M10 tank destroyer. But then we've got the British tanks. We've got a Churchill 7. You've got the Cromwell 4. This is cool. Cromwell 4 has got one of his British abilities, which is never give up. They get +1 to attack rolls when making, it's the dice rolls when making morale checks.
What's that one?
It's a flamethrower, Churchill Crocodile. Here we go. So this is has the flamethrower, which has no save and is anti-tank 4 or HE high explosive 3+ against infantry. It's pretty lethal. Got a Bren carrier, Sherman Firefly Captain. So this guy's not only a cool tank with slightly boosted abilities, so he gets to command up to 3 other tanks and some infantry. We've got commandos. We've got a British captain, a British lieutenant. We've got British veterans. We've got Tommies, like the typical British soldiers. And we've got a 6-pounder gun. So you've got like a whole British force. So let's give you a comparison, I'll tell you what, between, say, a Cromwell tank and let's look at the King Tiger. So we're going to do, it's a bit like old comparing your tanks cards, isn't it? So the Tiger is a 4+ dice compared to the Cromwell's 5+. He's a 5-star tank compared to the Cromwell, which is 2 stars. He's got the 88mm L71 gun. His range is 6, pretty lethal. Anti-tank 5 dice rolling to penetrate. Whereas the Cromwell is range 5, only anti-tank 3. And what else have we got? They've both got pretty similar NGs. The King Tiger is unreliable. Before moving, roll a war dice. If you fail, because he needs a 4+, reduce the movement to 1 for this turn. They were well known for stumbling into a hole.
Wow.
And it has sloped armor though, so it's -1 to penetration rolls from the front. So it's very hard to get hit on the King Tiger from the front. Whereas the Cromwell, because it's British, has the trusty never give up ability, so +1 to morale checks. So you can outrange people with your King Tiger, and you've got 2 extra dice in your attack roll. So it's and it's very hard for people to penetrate your front armor. So it's pretty hardcore tank. Let's have a look at the Michael Whitman's Tiger. So Michael Whitman's Tiger. Yes, so the King Tiger also is a 5+ armor. His armor dice starts on a 5, whereas the Cromwell starts on a 3. It's pretty weak, so it's going to get taken out. I mean, the Cromwell could be taken out by King Tiger hit straight away. Michael Whitman's Tiger is also a 5. His war dice is a 3+, so he hits on a 3+, and he's got anti-tank 4, so he's rolling 4 dice to get 3+. His range is 5. He's got extreme range as an ability. He may measure the range to the target, counting 1 diagonal square instead of horizontal or vertical, because you always count range horizontally and vertically, but he can count range diagonally, which obviously means he can shoot a lot further. And he's rare. You can only have one of these units, of course, because there's only one Michael Whitman. We're going to be introducing other kind of hero, well-known personality units like this that were sort of famous in the battle. He also gives you extra 1 card hand size. So he's not a commander, but he contributes to giving you more options. So it's very good. So that's how some of them compare. And obviously different abilities, like the Stug can only fire to the front of the vehicle. You have the Panther also has sloped armor. Often a lot of the big German tanks have that as well. Let's look at that Sherman Calliope. That's a lot of fun as well. There we go, the Sherman Calliope. shoots rockets at range 5, has an anti-tank of 1, but it's great for attacking infantry. You've got a 4+ roll against every single member of the squad in the target. And the firer becomes pinned after firing. So that represents the fact they've got to reload the rockets.
There's also great big handfuls of dice if you've got a 10-person infantry unit attacking.
Yeah, we played a game today with 10 dice. And we actually, at one point, we had 3 dice being used for the armor values on tanks. And because when you bring the tank on, until it's been shot at, you don't put. There's no point putting a dice next to it. So we were rolling with 7 dice, and you just re-roll. So it comes with 10 dice in the box, which is kind of enough to play most games. Of course, if everyone's got handfuls of dice lying around, so it shouldn't be hard to boost your numbers, but you never need more really than 10. Often you might get a re-roll, you might get an extra dice, so it's rare that you'd probably need more than 11 or 12 dice. You might want a few dice, little dice of different colors for the vehicles for their armor rating.
I had a question about how you employ figures in the game. So do you base the figures, or do you just have them standing, and then how do you take casualties out of the game?
Because the counters that you come with the game are also on the flip side, they've got hit damage markers. So you can, if you've got based up figures like Flames of War, or you've based up your Airfix figures or other figures like 4 or 5 to a block, you can have 2 blocks, and then just put on damage counters to represent damage being placed on the unit. Some people would just have loose plastic figures, and we often play like that. So you just move your figures around on board. Of course, if you're doing a really big battle, it's obviously easier to base them up.
Okay, I think we've covered everything we can for today for Airfix Battles. So thanks, Chris, and we will see you next time.
Awesome, thanks.